The rotor blades of two MH-60 Black Hawks didn't just cut through the air. They shattered the silence of Oak Creek General's parking lot, shaking the glass of the ICU windows. Dust swirled, alarms blared, and security drew their weapons, terrified of a terror attack. But this wasn't an invasion. It was a rescue mission. And the target wasn't a diplomat or a general. It was the woman walking to her beat-up sedan with a cardboard box in her hands, tears drying on her cheeks. They had fired Clara Reed 20 minutes ago for saving a life the wrong way. Now the most dangerous men on the planet were on their knees begging her to come back. Because without Clara, the man bleeding out in the chopper didn't stand a chance. The fluorescent lights of the emergency room at Oak Creek General hummed with a headache-inducing flicker, a sound Clara Reed had learned to tune out over the last 12 years. It was 11:45 p.m. on a Tuesday, usually a lull period, but tonight the air felt heavy, charged with a static that made the hair on her arms stand up. Clara adjusted her scrubs, the fabric worn soft from countless washes. She was the charge nurse for the night shift, a title that came with infinite responsibility and zero authority. She checked the vitals on bed 4, a teenager with a broken tibia from a skateboarding accident, and then moved to the nurse's station to chart. "You look like you're holding up a wall that's about to crumble, Clara," said Dr. Aris, leaning against the counter. He was a good doctor, exhausted and cynical, but he cared. He was one of the few who did. "Just another Tuesday, Aris," Clara muttered, uncapping her pen. "Admin is cutting the night budget again. They want us to reuse single-use pulse ox sensors if they look clean. Can you believe that?" Aris shook his head, rubbing his eyes. "Gavin Higgins is trying to secure his quarterly bonus. If he saves 10 grand on supplies, he gets 5 in his pocket. It's the way of the world." Clara tightened her grip on the pen. "It's going to kill someone." As if the universe was listening, the bay doors exploded open. The paramedics didn't walk in. They ran their boots, squeaking violently against the linoleum. The gurney they pushed was surrounded by a chaotic energy that silenced the waiting room instantly. Trauma 1. "We need Trauma 1. Now," the lead paramedic shouted. His uniform was soaked in blood, but it wasn't his. Clara was moving before her brain consciously registered the command. She vaulted over the counter, her sneakers gripping the floor as she intercepted the gurney. "Talk to me. What do we have?" "John Doe, male, roughly 40, multiple gunshot wounds to the thoracic cavity and upper thigh. He was dumped at the fire station 3 miles out. No ID. BP is crashing 60/40. He's bleeding out." Clara looked down at the patient. He was massive, built like a tank, with scars crisscrossing his arms that spoke of old battles. But right now his skin was the color of ash. He was gasping, his chest heaving in erratic, terrifying spasms. "Get him in," Clara commanded, swinging the gurney into the trauma bay. "Aris, I need you, Jenna. Get the rapid infuser ready." The team swarmed the patient. Clothes were cut away, revealing a torso that looked like it had been through a meat grinder. The wounds were professional, tight-grouping, high caliber. This wasn't a gang shooting. This was an execution that failed. "We're losing him," Aris yelled over the alarming monitors. "He's got a tension pneumothorax. I need to decompress the chest." Clara set up a chest tube tray. Clara moved with the precision of a machine, her hands flying across the sterile field. But as she handed Aris the scalpel, the bay door slid open with a calm, bureaucratic hiss. Gavin Higgins stood there, the hospital administrator. He was wearing a pristine navy suit that cost more than Clara's car, holding a tablet like a shield. "Stop," Higgins said. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the chaos like a knife. Dr. Aris froze the scalpel inches from the patient's skin. "Get out of here, Gavin. We're working." "I said, stop," Higgins repeated, stepping into the trauma room, completely ignoring the sterility protocols. Registration just ran his prints through the database. This man is listed as indigent and uninsured in the state system. We are on diversion status for non-critical uninsured patients due to the budget freeze initiated at midnight. Clara stared at him, her blood running cold. "He is dying, Higgins. Look at the monitor." "And he is stable enough to be transferred to County General," Higgins said, smoothly looking at his tablet. "Protocol 7B. If a patient is uninsured and transportable, we do not incur the cost of surgery. The helicopter for transfer is already called. Patch him up and ship him out." "He won't survive the flight," Clara screamed, stepping between Higgins and the patient. "He has minutes, not hours. That is a risk County will have to manage." Higgins sneered, his eyes dead and cold. "This hospital is a business, Nurse Reed. We are not a charity ward for street thugs. Step away from the patient." The patient on the table let out a guttural groan, his hand shooting up to grab Clara's wrist. His grip was shockingly strong for a dying man. He looked at her, his eyes a piercing, unusual shade of grey. He couldn't speak, but the plea was clear. "Don't let me die." Clara looked at the monitor. The heart rate was plummeting. The transfer chopper was at least 20 minutes out. If they waited, he was dead. "Dr. Aris," Clara said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Cut." Aris hesitated, looking at Higgins. "If you cut into that man—" Higgins threatened, his face turning red. "I will have your license. I will sue you for assault, and you, Reed, you will be escorted out by security." Aris's hand trembled. He had a family. He had loans. He lowered the scalpel. "Clara, I can't." The patient's eyes rolled back. The flatline tone began to whine. "Code blue," Jenna shouted. Clara didn't think. She didn't calculate her pension or her rent. She snatched the scalpel from Aris's frozen hand. "Nurse Reed, don't you dare!" Higgins roared. Clara jammed the chest tube trocar into the patient's intercostal space. Air hissed out a massive release of pressure. The patient's chest expanded. The heart monitor beeped once, twice. A rhythm returned. She worked feverishly, stabilizing the bleed, ignoring the administrator screaming behind her. She packed the wounds, started the transfusion, and hooked up the ventilator. "He's stable," she breathed out 30 seconds later. Her hands were covered in blood. The room was silent. Higgins walked up to her, his face purple with rage. He didn't look at the patient, who was now breathing steadily. He looked only at Clara. "Get out," he spat. The walk to the administrative office felt like a funeral procession. 2 security guards men Clara had shared coffee with for years walked behind her, eyes downcast. They were ashamed, but they needed their jobs too. Higgins sat behind his mahogany desk, the only expensive thing in the crumbling hospital. He didn't even offer her a seat. "Insubordination," Higgins began, typing furiously on his computer. "Practicing medicine without a license. Assault. Endangerment of hospital assets." "I saved his life," Clara said, standing tall. Her scrubs were still stained with the stranger's blood. "Protocol says we prioritize life over billing." "Protocol says you listen to your superiors," Higgins countered, not looking up. "That life you saved is going to cost this hospital $50,000 in unrecoverable resources. Do you have $50,000, Miss Reed?" Clara remained stunned. She had $12 in her bank account until Friday. You are terminated effective immediately, Higgins said, finally looking at her with a smug satisfaction. I am reporting you to the nursing board. You will never work in this state again. You'll be lucky to get a job scrubbing toilets at a truck stop. He slid a piece of paper across the desk. Termination of contract. Cause gross misconduct. Sign it, he demanded. Clara looked at the paper. She thought of the 12 years she gave this place. The missed Christmases, the double shifts, the time she held the hand of a dying child because the parents were stuck in traffic. She thought of the man downstairs, the grey-eyed stranger, whose heart was beating because she refused to back down. She picked up the pen and signed. Give me your badge, Higgins said, holding out a soft, manicured hand. Clara unclipped her ID. It had a photo of her from 10 years ago, bright-eyed and hopeful. She slammed it onto the desk. You're a small man, Gavin, she said quietly, and one day the world is going to show you just how small you are. Get her out of my sight, Higgins barked at the guards. The walk of shame was a ritual every nurse feared, but Clara never thought she'd be the one walking it. She was escorted to her locker. She took her stethoscope, a picture of her late mother, and a small cactus plant she kept on the windowsill. As she walked through the main hallway, heads turned. Other nurses, doctors, orderlies, they all watched. Some whispered. Dr. Aris wouldn't meet her eyes. He was pretending to read a chart, shame radiating off him in waves. Jenna, the junior nurse, ran up to her, tears streaming down her face. Clara, this isn't right. We're going to strike. We'll sign a petition. Clara shook her head, forcing a sad smile. Don't, Jenna. You have a baby on the way. Don't lose your insurance for me. Just keep an eye on that John Doe in bed 4. Okay, Higgins will try to discharge him the second he wakes up. I will, Jenna sobbed. I promise. The security guards walked her to the automatic doors. Sorry, Clara, one of them mumbled as the doors slid open. The cold night air hit her like a physical blow. Not your fault, Mike, she said. She stepped out into the darkness of the parking lot. The hospital lights hummed behind her, a fortress she was now exiled from. It was 12:30 a.m. Her career was over. Her reputation was destroyed. She walked to her car, a rusted 2015 Honda Civic that needed a new starter. She placed her box on the hood and leaned against the cold metal, burying her face in her hands. She didn't cry. She was too tired to cry. She just breathed, trying to figure out how she was going to pay rent, how she was going to tell her dad. She failed. She fumbled for her keys, the metal cold against her fingers. She opened the door and threw the box into the passenger seat. She put the key in the ignition. It turned, but the engine just clicked. No, she whispered. Please, not tonight. She tried again. Click, click, click. She slammed her hands against the steering wheel, a scream of frustration tearing from her throat. It was the breaking point. The unfairness of it all crushed her. And then she heard it. At first it was a low thrumming, like distant thunder. But the sky was clear. The sound grew louder, a rhythmic thwop, thwop, thwop that vibrated in her chest. Clara looked up. From the north, 2 dark shapes materialized against the moonlit sky. They were flying low, dangerously low. No running lights. Military. They weren't heading for the helipad on the roof. They were banking hard, the nose of the lead chopper dipping aggressively. They were aiming for the parking lot. Inside the hospital, the chaos began instantly. The vibrations from the rotors knocked picture frames off the walls in the lobby. The receptionist ducked under her desk, screaming that it was an earthquake. In his office, Gavin Higgins spilled his coffee as his window rattled violently. "What the hell is going on?" he shouted, running to the window. He saw them. Two massive helicopters, matte, black, sleek, and predatory. They were hovering just feet above the asphalt, kicking up a storm of dust and debris. "Who authorized a landing?" Higgins yelled, grabbing his phone to dial security. "Get them out of there. That's private property." Down in the parking lot, Clara scrambled out of her car, shielding her eyes from the blinding spotlights that suddenly snapped on from the belly of the lead helicopter. The wind was ferocious, whipping her hair across her face, stinging her skin with grit. The first helicopter touched down with a heavy thud, the landing gear groaning under the weight. The rotors didn't stop. They kept spinning, ready for immediate liftoff. The side doors slid open. 6 men jumped out. They weren't police. They weren't regular army. They were dressed in all-black tactical gear. No insignias, faces covered by balaclavas holding rifles that looked like they belonged in a sci-fi movie. They moved with a terrifying, fluid coordination. Clara backed up against her car, her heart hammering against her ribs. Terrorists, a raid. The soldiers didn't scan the area. They didn't secure the perimeter. They ran straight toward the hospital entrance. But one of them, the leader, a giant of a man with a radio strapped to his chest, stopped. He scanned the parking lot. His gaze locked onto Clara, standing by her broken-down Civic. He tapped his headset and changed direction, sprinting toward her. Clara froze. She raised her hands instinctively. "I didn't do anything. I'm just leaving." The soldier stopped 5 feet from her. He didn't point his weapon at her. He slung it behind his back in one smooth motion and ripped off his mask. He was young, maybe late 20s, with eyes that looked like they hadn't slept in a week. He looked frantic. "Are you medical staff?" he shouted over the roar of the engines. Clara stammered. "I just got fired." "I don't care about your employment status," the soldier yelled. "Are you a nurse?" "Yes, I'm a trauma nurse." The soldier grabbed his radio. "Command, I have a localized asset in the LZ. Female identifies as trauma nurse." He looked back at her. "What's your name?" Clara Reed." The soldier paused, listening to his earpiece. His eyes went wide. He looked at her with a mix of awe and relief. "Reed? Did you say Reed?" "Yes." "Control confirm ID Clara Reed." He listened for a split second, then looked at her. "Ma'am, you need to come with us. Now." "What?" "No." Clara backed away. "I'm not going anywhere with you." "Who are you people?" "We are Black Ridge Securities," the soldier said, stepping closer. "And we are here for the man you admitted 30 minutes ago, the John Doe." Clara's stomach dropped. "The gunshot victim. His name is Captain Elias Walker," the soldier said, his voice cracking with intensity. "He is the asset, and our onboard telemetry says his vitals are crashing again. He needs stabilization for extraction, and our medic took a round during the extraction. We have no medical personnel on site." "He's inside." Clara pointed to the ER doors. "There are doctors inside." "We don't trust them," the soldier barked. "We intercepted comms. The administrator ordered a transfer that would kill him. We are not letting that happen. We need someone he trusts. We need the person who saved him initially." Clara stared at him. "How do you know that was me?" "Because Captain Walker is conscious," the soldier said, "and he is asking for the woman with the sad eyes who defied the suit." Clara felt a shiver go down her spine that had nothing to do with the cold. "Ma'am, please." The soldier's voice softened, losing its military edge for a second. "He's my brother. If we move him now without a nurse, he dies. The hospital admin is blocking us. You have to come back in there with us." Clara looked at the hospital doors. Higgins was there now, flanked by security, looking terrified but obstinate. She looked at her dead car. She looked at the soldier's desperate face. She took a breath. "I need a crash kit, and I need you to make sure Higgins doesn't touch me." The soldier grinned a dangerous, wolfish expression. "Ma'am, if Higgins touches you, I will break his fingers." "Lead the way," Clara said. The automatic doors of the emergency room entrance blew open, not from a sensor, but from the sheer force of Jack's kicking them off their tracks. The glass shattered, raining down on the linoleum like diamonds, but nobody moved to sweep it up. Clara walked through the debris, flanked by 4 heavily armed operatives of Black Ridge Securities. Just minutes ago, she had walked out of these doors as a disgraced employee, clutching a box of knickknacks. Now she was re-entering like a warlord, retaking lost territory. The lobby was a scene of frozen panic. Patients in the waiting area were pressed against the walls. The reception staff were hiding beneath their desks. And standing in the center of the hallway, blocking the path to the trauma bay, was Gavin Higgins. He was flanked by the 2 hospital security guards, Mike and Steve, who looked like they wanted to be literally anywhere else on Earth. Higgins's face was a mask of incredulous fury. He pointed a trembling finger at Clara. "I fired you. You are trespassing. Security, arrest her." Mike, the guard on the left, looked at the assault rifle in Jax's hands, then looked at his own belt, which contained only a flashlight and a radio. He took a step back. "Mr. Higgins, I'm not doing that." "Cowards!" Higgins screamed. He stepped forward himself, his ego blinding him to the danger. "You cannot bring weapons into a healthcare facility. This is a violation of federal code. I am calling the police." Jax didn't even slow down. He marched right up to Higgins, towering over the administrator by a full head. "Sir, under the International Private Security Act and the Good Samaritan Clause of the Active Extraction Mandate, we are commandeering this floor. You are currently obstructing the rescue of a high-value asset." "I am the administrator of this hospital." Higgins spat his face, turning purple. "And that asset is an uninsured vagrant who is costing me money." Jax moved with a speed that was terrifying to witness. He grabbed Higgins by the lapels of his expensive Italian suit and lifted him off the ground. He slammed the administrator against the wall, his feet dangling inches off the floor. "That vagrant," Jax growled, his face inches from Higgins's, "is the CEO of Black Ridge Securities. He is worth $3 billion. And right now his life is the only thing keeping me from dismantling this building brick by brick with you inside it." Higgins gasped, his eyes bulging. The air left the room. $3 billion. Jax dropped him. Higgins slid to the floor, coughing, his arrogance finally punctured by raw fear. "Clara," Jax said, not looking back. "Lead." Clara stepped over Higgins' legs. She didn't look down. She didn't gloat. She just walked past him, her eyes fixed on the trauma bay doors. Inside Trauma 1, the situation was deteriorating. Dr. Aris was standing by the bed, looking helpless. Jenna was manually bagging the patient tears streaming down her face. The monitors were blaring a chaotic rhythm. "What's happening?" Clara barked, snapping into her command voice. The fired nurse persona was gone. The expert clinician was back. Dr. Aris looked up, relief flooding his face. "Clara, thank God. BP is 70/30. He's putting out blood from the chest tube. I think an intercostal artery was nicked by a bone fragment." Higgins forbade me from opening him up again. Clara rushed to the bedside. Elias Walker was pale, his skin clammy and cold. His eyes were half open, glazed with pain. But when he saw her, they focused. He let out a ragged breath. "You came back." He rasped, his voice barely audible over the alarms. I don't leave jobs unfinished, Clara said, grabbing a pair of gloves. She looked at Jax. We can't move him like this. If we lift him, the pressure change will kill him. I need to clamp that bleeder here. We have 3 minutes before local law enforcement arrives, Jax said, checking his watch. The chopper is burning fuel. Can you do it in 2? I can do it in 1, if you keep everyone out of my way, Clara said. She turned to Dr. Aris. Aris, I need a vascular clamp and 2-0 silk. Now. Aris hesitated for a fraction of a second, looking at the door where Higgins was likely recovering. Aris, Clara shouted. Be a doctor, not an employee. Aris nodded, a spark of rebellion igniting in his eyes. He grabbed the tray. Ready. Clara worked with a speed that blurred the vision. She reopened the small incision around the chest tube, her fingers diving into the warm, slick cavity of the wound. It was blind work she was feeling for the pulse of the bleeder with her fingertips. Pressure is dropping, Jenna cried out. 60/20. Clara, we're losing him. I got it. Clara gritted her teeth. She felt the spurting artery against her index finger. She slid the clamp down, guided by pure instinct and 12 years of trauma experience. Click. The flow of blood into the suction canister stopped. BP stabilizing, Jenna gasped. Rising, 80/50. Clara quickly threw a stitch around the vessel, tying it off with a surgeon's knot. She pulled her hands back, covered in red. He's stable for transport. Let's go. Jax nodded to his men. Package him. Let's move. The soldiers moved the patient onto their own collapsible tactical stretcher with practiced ease. They secured him with straps, locking his IV lines down so they wouldn't rip out. As they wheeled Elias out of the trauma bay, the hallway was lined with staff. Nurses, orderlies, and doctors stood in the silence, watching the procession. Higgins was standing by the exit, holding his phone, screaming at a 911 dispatcher. Yes, terrorists. They have guns. They are kidnapping a patient. He saw the group approaching and blocked the door again, foolishly spreading his arms. You are not taking him. The police are 2 minutes away. You will all go to jail. Jax didn't break stride. He looked at Clara. Ma'am? Clara stopped the gurney. She walked up to Higgins. The height difference was significant, but in that moment, she felt 10 feet tall. Gavin, she said calmly. You fired me for saving a life because it wasn't profitable. Now you're trying to stop a transfer that will save him again. You aren't worried about the law. You're worried about the lawsuit that's coming when people find out you tried to let a billionaire die to save a budget bonus. Higgins turned pale. I was following protocol. Your protocol is broken, Clara said. She reached out and plucked the phone from his hand. She ended the call and dropped the device into a biohazard bin filled with medical waste. Move, she whispered. Higgins moved. The team burst out into the night air. The helicopter rotors were spinning faster now, whipping up a frenzy of wind. The noise was deafening. Load up! Jack screamed. They slid the stretcher into the belly of the Black Hawk. Clara climbed in after it, followed by Jax and his team. As the pilot pulled pitch and the helicopter lifted heavily into the sky, Clara looked down through the open side door. She saw the hospital shrinking below her, a box of light in the darkness. She saw her rusted Honda Civic sitting alone in the parking lot. She had lost her job, her car, and her stability in the span of 1 hour. She was currently flying in a military aircraft with a group of mercenaries to an unknown location. She reached down and checked Elias's pulse. It was stronger. She took a deep breath of the kerosene-tinged air. For the first time in years, she didn't feel tired. She felt alive. The interior of the MH-60 Black Hawk was a sensory overload of noise, vibration, and darkness. The only light came from the dim red tactical bulbs overhead and the green glow of the instrument panels in the cockpit. The wind roared through the open gunner windows before the crew chief slid them shut, sealing them in a vibrating steel capsule. Clara sat on a canvas jump seat, next to the stretcher, her knees touching the tactical vest of the soldier opposite her. She had hooked Elias up to the portable monitor. They had brought a ruggedized piece of military tech that looked like it could survive a bomb blast. "Here!" Jax shouted over the intercom system, handing her a heavy headset. Clara put it on. The roar of the rotors instantly dampened to a dull hum, replaced by the crackle of radio chatter. "Viper 1 to control." The pilot's voice was cool and detached. "Package secured. The nurse is on board. ETA to the nest is 40 mics. Copy, Viper 1. Be advised we have unrecognized bogies on radar to your south. Keep it low." Clara looked at Jax. "Bogies? Someone is chasing us." Jax looked at her, his expression grim. "Elias has enemies, Clara. Powerful ones. The people who shot him. They didn't want him injured. They wanted him erased. When they find out he's not in the morgue, they'll come to finish the job." Clara looked down at the man on the stretcher. Elias was still unconscious, the sedation keeping him under, but his face was relaxed now. In the dim red light, he looked less like a corporate titan and more like a warrior at rest. "Who is he really?" Clara asked. "You said he runs a security company, but you guys operate like special forces." "We were," Jax said, leaning forward. "Most of us. Rangers, SEALs, SAS. Elias recruited us. Black Ridge isn't just security. We do the jobs governments can't touch. Hostage rescues in hostile territory, extracting aid workers from war zones. Elias built this company after he left the Marines. He's a good man, Clara. He uses his money to fix things." Clara adjusted the IV flow rate. "He looked at me," she said softly. "In the ER. Before he went under. He looked terrified. Not of dying, but of something else." "He was terrified of failing," Jax said. "We were gathering intel on a human trafficking ring operating out of the port. It was a setup, an ambush. Elias took 3 rounds to get his team out. He drove himself to that fire station so the rest of us wouldn't be compromised." Clara felt a pang of guilt for every time she had judged the thugs who came into her ER with gunshot wounds. She had judged him too initially. Suddenly the helicopter banked hard to the left, throwing Clara against the fuselage. The engine pitch changed, screaming higher. "Hang on!" the pilot shouted over the comms. "Radar lock, deploying countermeasures. Thump, thump, thump." Flares shot out from the tail of the helicopter, illuminating the night sky outside the window with blinding white phosphorus. "What is happening?" Clara yelled, grabbing the stretcher to stabilize Elias. "Drone," Jax said, unclipping his safety harness and moving to the window with his rifle. "They're tracking us with a hunter-killer drone." The helicopter dove, the stomach-churning sensation of free fall, hitting Clara hard. They were flying nap of the earth now, skimming just feet above the treetops to confuse the radar. The vibration was intense. Beep, beep, beep. The medical monitor on Elias's chest started alarmed. "No, no, no," Clara hissed, checking the screen. "His heart rate is spiking. 140, 150. Oxygen saturation is dropping." "Is it the flight?" Jax asked, looking back from the window. "It's the stress," Clara shouted. "And, damn it," she looked at the drainage bag for the chest tube. It was filling up with bright red blood again. The violent maneuvers had dislodged the clot or torn a new vessel. "He's bleeding out again," Clara yelled. "I need stable flight. You have to stop jerking the bird." "If I fly straight, We get blown out of the sky, the pilot retorted. If you don't fly straight, he bleeds to death in 5 minutes, Clara screamed back. Choose. The cabin went silent for a heartbeat. Jax, the pilot asked. Jax looked at his brother on the stretcher. He looked at the radar warning of the drone hunting them. Then he looked at Clara. He saw the fierce determination in her eyes. She wasn't asking for permission. She was stating a fact. Level out, Jax ordered. Give her 2 minutes. We'll take our chances with the drone. Copy, the pilot said, his voice tight. Leveling out, bringing us up to 2,000 feet. You're a sitting duck, Jax. Just drive, Jax said. He turned to Clara. 2 minutes, Clara. Save him. The helicopter smoothed out. The shaking stopped. But the silence was terrifying because now they were a slow, steady target in the open sky. Clara didn't think about the drone. She didn't think about the missile that might be locking onto their heat signature. She focused entirely on the plastic tubing and the red flow of life leaving Elias's body. I need light, she ordered. A soldier clicked on a tactical flashlight, beaming it onto Elias's chest. Clara worked frantically. She couldn't do surgery here. She had to improvise. She grabbed a pressure dressing from the kit Jax had stolen from the ambulance. This is going to hurt him, she muttered. She pressed her weight down onto the wound, packing the dressing deep around the tube site to create a tamponade effect. It was crude, brutal medicine, but it was all she had. Elias groaned, his body arching slightly, even through the sedation. Stay with me, Elias, she whispered into his ear. Don't you dare quit on me now. I didn't lose my job for a corpse. She pushed harder. Her arms burned. The helicopter felt like it was suspended in a void. 1 minute, the pilot warned. I have a lock tone. They're painting us. Almost. Clara watched the monitor. The heart rate was fluttering. 160. 155. 150. The bleeding in the tube slowed. The pressure was working. Come on, she begged. Suddenly, Elias's hand shot up. He grabbed Clara's forearm. His grip was weak, but his eyes were open again. He looked at her, then up at Jax. Jax, he wheezed. I'm here, boss, Jax said. Get her safe, Elias whispered. We're all getting safe, Clara said firmly. I got the bleed. It stopped. Time's up, the pilot shouted. Missile launch detected, bracing. The helicopter violently rolled inverted. Clara was thrown against the ceiling, her harness the only thing saving her neck. The flares popped again, a brilliant, chaotic firework show outside. Boom! A shockwave hit them. The missile had detonated close by. Shrapnel pinged against the hull like hail. The helicopter shuddered, the engine whining in protest, but the rotors kept spinning. Direct hit avoided, the pilot yelled, exhilaration in his voice. We're clear. Dropping into the valley. We're in the shadow. The helicopter leveled out again, flying low and fast through a canyon that blocked the radar. Clara hung limp in her harness, breathing hard. She looked down. Her hand was still pressing on Elias's chest. He was unconscious again, but the monitor showed a steady green line. Jax unbuckled and floated over to her. He put a hand on her shoulder. You got ice in your veins, Clara Reed, he said, shaking his head in disbelief. I've seen combat medics freeze in situations like that. Clara wiped a smudge of blood from her cheek. I worked the night shift in a city ER for 12 years, Jax. People shooting at me is a Tuesday. A drone is just a fancy drive-by. Jax actually laughed. It was a dry, barking sound. Welcome to Black Ridge, Clara. I haven't accepted the job yet, she retorted, checking the IV line. We're almost at the nest, Jack said, looking out the window where lights were appearing in the distance. Once we land, the real work starts. He needs real surgery to repair that lung. And our surgeon is in London. Clara looked at the extensive trauma kit on the wall of the chopper. She looked at Elias. I'm not a surgeon, she said. No, Jack said. But you're the only one here who knows what they're doing. You're going to have to assist. Or maybe more. The helicopter began its descent. Below them wasn't a hospital. It was a massive, fortified compound built into the side of a mountain, surrounded by high walls and patrol towers. Clara realized then that she had truly crossed a line. There was no going back to Oak Creek General. There was no going back to her old life. She was part of this world now, a world of private armies, billion-dollar secrets, and midnight firefights. And strangely, as the landing gear touched down on the concrete pad, she didn't feel afraid. She felt needed. The medical wing of the nest looked more like the bridge of a starship than a hospital ward. Walls of brushed steel monitors floating on articulated arms, and a surgical robot that cost more than the entire annual budget of Oak Creek General. But technology was useless without hands to guide it. Clara scrubbed in the harsh antiseptic soap, stinging the raw skin of her hands. She was trembling just slightly. The adrenaline of the flight was fading, replaced by the crushing weight of reality. She was about to assist in a complex thoracotomy on a billionaire paramilitary leader, guided by a voice on a screen. Clara! Jax's voice came over the intercom. He was in the observation deck above, pacing like a caged tiger. Dr. Wu is online from London. The connection is encrypted and stable. Clara stepped into the operating theatre. A massive screen on the wall flickered to life, revealing an older Asian man in surgical scrubs, sitting in what looked like a home office, but surrounded by monitors. Ms. Reed, Dr. Wu said, his voice calm and precise, filtered through the high-definition speakers. Jax tells me you are a trauma nurse, not a surgeon. Is this correct? Yes, doctor, Clara said, snapping on her gloves. I've assisted in hundreds of chest openings, but I've never led one. Tonight you are my hands, Wu said. The robotic arm is offline due to the EMP shielding we have active. You must do this manually. Mr. Walker has a lacerated lung and a pericardial effusion. If we do not drain the fluid around his heart and stitch the lung, he will go into cardiac arrest within the hour. Clara looked down at Elias. He was draped, only the square of his battered chest visible. I'm ready, she lied. Scalpel, Wu commanded. For the next 2 hours, the room existed in a vacuum of time. There was only Wu's voice and Clara's hands. Incision, retractor, suction, suture. It was grueling. Every movement had to be perfect. Twice Clara hit a vessel that obscured her vision with blood, and she had to blindly clamp it while Wu shouted instructions. Her back ached, her eyes burned, but she didn't stop. Okay, Wu said, finally his voice sounding exhausted, even through the digital link. The lung is sealed. The pericardium is drained. Close him up, Ms. Reed. You've done adequate work. High praise, Clara muttered, placing the final staples. She stepped back, dropping the instruments onto the tray. Vitals, she asked the room. Stable. The automated anesthesiology monitor chirped. BP 110/70. O2 saturation 98%. Clara slumped against the wall, sliding down until she hit the floor. She ripped off her mask, gasping for air. She had done it. The door to the OR hissed open. Jax walked in. He wasn't wearing scrubs. He was in full tactical gear, his rifle slung across his chest. He looked more on edge than he had in the helicopter. "He's alive," Clara said, looking up at him. "He's going to make it." Jax didn't smile. He walked over to the monitors and checked the readings. Then he turned to Clara. "You need to stay here," he said, his voice low. "Lock the door from the inside." Clara frowned, standing up. "Why the surgery is over." "The drone that attacked us," Jax said, checking the magazine of his rifle. "We analyzed the flight path. It didn't track us from the city. It was launched from within a 10-mile radius of this mountain, and the encryption keys it used to bypass our outer defenses, they came from inside the house." Clara felt the blood drain from her face. "You have a mole." "We have a traitor." Jax corrected, his eyes hard as flint. "And until I find out who it is, nobody enters this room. Not my men, not the cleaning crew, nobody. You are the only person I know for a fact isn't on the payroll of whoever wants Elias dead." "How do you know that?" "Because you were fired for saving him," Jax said. "And you got on a helicopter with strangers to save him again. You have nothing to gain but his life. Everyone else here, they have ambition." He handed her a heavy black pistol. Clara stared at it. "Jax, I save lives. I don't take them." "Tonight you might have to do both," Jax said, pressing the gun into her hand. "If that door opens and it's not me, you shoot. Do you understand? You shoot until the slide locks back." He turned and walked out. The heavy steel door sealed with a pneumatic thud. The electronic lock engaged.